Wall Street says the economy is strong. Main Street knows that is a complete lie. Welcome back to season 3 of The Pursuit of Progress. I'm Adam, joined by my co host Ben, and today we're breaking down one of the most dangerous disconnects in the economy right now. The headlines, they say inflation is down, markets are rallying, but when you talk to everyday Americans, when you check your own wallet, you know the truth. Something still it's off. So today, we're actually going to walk you through 10 key points to explain what's really happening and why the consumer might be the thing that actually breaks the economy, not Wall Street. Let's get into it.
Remember, I always share this and I always point this out. The consumer is the economy. And this is the truth that never makes headlines. The American economy is the American consumer. It's not Wall Street. It's not interest rates. It's not the Federal Reserve. It's not tech stocks. Roughly 70% of the American GDP comes from regular people spending regular money, groceries, gas, rent, services. That is the engine. And when it starts to sputter, everything else follows. The economy isn't built on savings, it's built on spending. That's why when even a small slowdown in household budgets creates big waves across the system. Remember, the consumer is the economy.
Yeah, and I think, kind of following up from that, why strong spending in a sense is a mirage. Spending it looks high, but it's mostly inflated by those higher prices, and it's also a lot larger of a population. That doesn't mean people are doing better. It means they're spending more just to get the same. So behind the numbers, you'll see fewer items, per cart, more discount hunting, and probably a little bit less of the impulse buying. So don't let that record spending headline fool you, because strong spending doesn't mean necessarily strong consumers.
Yeah, and I think what you're talking about is inflation versus buying power. Prices have risen across essentials. When you look at housing, food, utilities, people don't have a lot of choices right now. They have constraints. People aren't spending confidently, they're spending out of survival. And when inflation outpaces wage growth, which it has for years, buying power shrinks, and so does economic resilience. And that's what we've experienced in 2025. And let's see what 2026 looks like.
Yep. I think in a sense, debt is replacing income at this point. We're watching
Yeah.
people use credit just to stay afloat, not to get ahead, not to invest in the future, but just to survive right now. And I think that's the scariest kind of debt, the kind that has no upside whatsoever, only this temporary relief. And that's not optimism. That's, desperation disguised by, just a swipeable credit card, a swipeable piece of plastic.
When you look at all the different means the consumer has to take on debt right now, there are just so many things at their fingertips. And the worst part is that it's so accessible, Adam. You have credit cards, which we all know, auto loans. How easy is it to get qualified for an auto loan? Like we talked about in an episode a couple weeks ago, the 50-year mortgage, they're also doing the same thing in auto loans. They're extending that term out. They're keeping the payments the same, but then they're just extending the terms to keep people in debt for longer. Here in the last couple of years, buy now, pay later has really emerged, and that's something that is very, very toxic for the consumer. So consumer is under tremendous debt pressure right now. Student loans at an all-time high, credit card debt at an all-time high, auto loans at an all-time high. And guess what? National debt, our government, also at an all-time high. We have a record deficit right now. That's what keeps me up at night is all of this record debt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%.
And when the debt goes, usually it'll start to impact savings. So when savings are gone, that's your safety net. And that's when the safety net is missing. We're not just talking about being low on savings. We're out. Most people are out of savings. Your average American either lives paycheck to paycheck or has less than a $2,000 emergency fund saved. Pandemic era cash buffers are gone. One emergency sends many households right into debt. And without savings, every bump in the road turns into a crisis. And that turns a slow economy into a fragile one.
Yeah, man. Insurance, rent, groceries, utilities, this cost pressure is really hitting from every angle right now. And these aren't things that people can cut. That's the problem. There's no easy way out. This pressure, it's not optional. It's really built in at the moment. And it's not good.
Yeah, well, just share your story real quick with your dog. You love your dog, and share kind of what happened with him, just the cost involved as far as taking care of your animal.
Yeah, Charlie has fresh knees. Both ACLs were completely replaced. He's got these metal plates on both knees at this point. So he's only 6.5, so pretty young. But all in, I think it was right around 12 grand. And I didn't really have, I didn't have dog insurance. I didn't really think about that at the time. Now looking back, I probably should have. But yeah, about 12 grand just to do something that was not that major, you know?
We all love our pets, and it's so difficult to not do that. But then at the same time, there's definitely a cost involved, and so that's why we started this podcast. Is we want people to be more intentional. We want them to have options, flexibility, confidence, and again, right now, that's where the consumer is at, and that's what's so concerning. And this right here is one thing that doesn't show up in the headlines always. The job reports always focused on how many jobs are added, but it doesn't necessarily look at quiet layoffs and income compression. And what I mean by that is that these are the things that are in the headlines. So when companies start cutting, it doesn't make headlines because when they start, they're cutting things like hours, or they're reducing or eliminating overtime, or maybe they've taken down some of those job postings. And that doesn't show up in the unemployment stats right away, but it does show up in paychecks. When that overtime gets eliminated, the person on Main Street is going to feel that, and that impacts spending immediately. As a matter of fact, I was working on a couple pre-approvals this afternoon, and I always ask the potential applicant to send in their pay stubs from 2023, 2024, and then 2025, because it gives me the opportunity to look at their historical earning figures all at once. And so on the pay stub, it'll break down their overtime, uh, year to date, how much they earned in 2023, 2024. And then the fact that we're coming out of 2025, I have that right there. 3 applicants in a row all made significantly less overtime in 2025 than they did in 2023 and 2024. I've always said that loan officers and originators, people, professionals who are helping get folks qualified, we are the window into the economy. We see what's happening first because we are working with Main Street on a daily basis.
Wow, that's great, man. I think we need to do a future episode just having you maybe share, obviously without sharing people's names or anything like that, but just, some of like the biggest takeaways you're seeing right now and how it's different from a year ago and, just kind of your take on some of that stuff. That'd be really interesting. Yeah, well, let's talk now about a little bit about the economic domino effect because cracks, they come from crashes and weak spending leads to weak earnings, which then leads to these hiring freezes, which leads to less income and so on. So these
Mhm.
dominoes, they're already wobbling at this point, and most people just aren't even watching the table. I think kind of like you're saying, you have this kind of little secret window into the economy before a lot of other people do. But man, it sure seems like there's a lot of things that are going in the wrong direction instead of the right.
Yeah, and one thing that has been positive for housing is interest rates have trickled down a little bit, so that has been positive from a economic and housing perspective. But we need more. And so what happens next if this trend continues? Again, not necessarily mortgage housing related, but we're talking about the overall trend, just the overall health of the consumer, income, debt loads, consumer spending, inflation. We're talking about all of that. So what happens next if this trend continues? Well, if consumers keep pulling back, that's where corporate earnings drop. Remember, one person's debt is another person's asset. One person's liability expense is another person's income. So if corporate earnings drop, layoffs will rise, sentiment tanks, and then I'm not saying that a collapse is certain, but I am saying that there is a real risk here, and the risks are starting to sharpen and rise year after year.
So I think to kind of clap this one out, what to do right now. These are some just suggestions that Ben and I put together, but more than anything else, this isn't panic time; it's preparation time. And that's true for real estate, for personal life. Just really, I think that's such a just smart thing to look at a lot of areas of our lives right now. It's not panic time; it's preparation time. And a few ways you guys can do this. Number one, build cash. Even small reserves can really help.
Yeah.
Avoid any form of dumb debt. Tighten up your spending whenever you can. Maybe look for, the cheaper options in the grocery store occasion, whatever it may be. Just figure out ways you can tighten up your spending, stay consistent with your investing, and
Mhm.
diversify income wherever possible. Try not to be focused where you only have one source of income. Ideally, you have multiple sources of income. I remember seeing a stat that we shared a couple weeks back on the average millionaire. I think they have like 7 streams of income. So
Yeah.
just maybe using this as an opportunity to think about if you are up against the wall, do you have any other forms of income that might be able to come in and help out weathering that storm? Smart money, it's not waiting for a crash. It's bracing right now because you feel the pain long before the markets do.
I've mentioned my brother a lot on this channel, and one thing that he's doing right now is he's kind of restructuring his portfolio. He's rebalancing it. And one of the things that he's doing is he has some assets and some properties that are completely paid off. What he's doing is he's opening credit or taking out a loan in some of those so he can be a little bit more flexible and restructure some of the debt that he has currently. He does things like sell trailers, he has construction equipment, and a lot of that type of debt is on shorter terms and the interest rate is a little bit more variable. So you're going to see higher payments. And so what he's doing is he's extending that to longer term debt. He's taking a little bit more control over his cash flow and using the equity that he has in some of his assets to subsidize and help with that. So it allows him to be flexible. And if you're someone that has assets, you have options, you have things that you can leverage or rebalance the portfolio. That's something that you want to be aware of. Another mistake that I see a lot of people make is, especially when it comes to income, and this is more for folks that are entrepreneurs or business owners, salespeople on commissions, is they get in this tendency when they get used to a certain income, they feel like it's never going to stop or it's never going to change, and then that lifestyle gets so elevated that they're just thinking their income is going to be at that level forever. And then all of a sudden, there's a pullback in the economy or a certain industry, and that revenue could fall by 20 to 50%. And if that happens, if you're someone that is highly leveraged with a lot of bad debt, or you have to go earn a bunch of money just to go pay all these bills, that's where it gets really scary. And so you want to avoid that.
Very well said.
Well, guess what? That's a wrap. This wraps up our episode of The Pursuit of Progress. If you got value from today's breakdown, hit that follow button, share with someone who's feeling the squeeze right now, because most Americans are. Let's get the word out. We're going to keep giving you real talk, no sugarcoating, so you can stay ahead of the curve in 2026 and not get crushed by it. Thanks for being here. We love you guys, and we'll see you next week.
We'll see you guys next time. Have a good one.